Hello there, welcome to our science lesson today. We are looking at size of population. And previously we have defined the meaning of population. We said when you have members of the same species occupying the same habitat, then that one forms a population. Same species, but they are in the same habitat. Same habitat, then we call that one as a population. We give several examples. If we have, for instance, we have a population of lions in a game park, game reserve, then this, because it is composed of only, the flock is composed of, or the pack is mostly lions. They are of the same species, in the same habitat, which is the game reserve, then it becomes a population. But we need to remind ourselves that populations are never constant. They never remain the same. They usually fluctuate in that there'll be rise and fall in the number of organisms. And we are able to look at the reasons why populations fluctuate. There are several reasons. Some of them are natural reasons, whereby human beings have no control. Like if, for instance, there is competition. Competition brings in struggle for organisms to exist. And struggling to exist comes with survival for the fittest. So it's the fit that will survive, and then the ones that are unfit, they are going to perish. So perishing of organisms in a population, it means the population is decreasing. But again, it reaches a time when conditions are okay, when conditions are able to support the survival of organisms, reproduction rate increases, death rate decreases, therefore the population goes back to normal. Or in other words, if it had just gone down, it goes back. But it again will go in that form. So there will be an oscillation. But at that point, it's only when they have reached the carrying capacity. Remember our graph of that kind, whereby if this is the population, and that's the time, we expect there'll be an increase, normal increase, if we have organism being introduced in the ecosystem for the first time, where we have enough resources and conditions are okay, or conditions are suitable for survival of organisms. They rise exponentially, then reach a point where there is constance. But the constance is what we are interrogating. We are questioning the constance of the population. It is always rise and fall at that point. And we are able to find out the reason. One of them, we said, it is natural, as we have already put it. But other reasons are deliberate efforts by human beings, which we are going to look at later. But for this case, we want to look at slightly natural causes. We have said it's natural, but one of the most common cause of the natural causes is seasons. Seasons. We said seasons are changes in the patterns of weather. So we have changes in patterns of weather. And those changes are due to amount of heat and light that reaches the earth. Amount of heat and light that reaches the earth. but also due to the surface inclination. Surface inclination of the earth, relative to sun. Relative to the sun. So sometimes heat and light reaching the earth will be interfered or will be influenced by clarity of the sky. If we have more clouds, in the sky, less light and less heat will reach the earth. So the kind of weather that will be experienced is slightly cooler as compared to when the sky is clear. A clear sky and a sky where we have more clouds, there'll be a difference. When there is clarity in sky, more heat and light will reach the earth. When more light and heat reaches the earth, it means it also comes with increase in temperature. And increase in temperature has several effects, like increasing the rate of evaporation from the surface of the earth, which means the surface of the earth, together with plants and animals, will be losing a lot of water. When plants and animals lose a lot of water, net effect is that the physiology or performance of the organisms are going to be interfered with. Therefore, in the process, it might lead to decrease in population size, because if that kind of weather condition increases for a longer time, there will be a problem. That's why during summer, for instance, you realize that the reproductive rates of plants and animals usually decreases. Therefore, that time is when we have a drop in the number of organisms that are occupying a given habitat. But you'll also realize that during spring, when conditions are just good, right from winter, when it was cold, now the temperatures are increasing, enzymes are activated, all the conditions are right, plants will increase the rate of reproduction, seeding increases, flowering increases. That means more plants are available. When more plants are available, they attract more animals, or it is going to facilitate growth of more animals. When we have more animals and more plants, it means the size of population has increased. So heat and light are very important. Then the angle at which the sun rays hits the surface of the earth is also very important, because it also affects the amount of heat and light, specifically heat. For instance, if this is the globe, and this is the sun, if you're going to have sun rays hitting that point, there'll be more heat at that point than, because we have rays at that point, then at that point, because the sun is now just hitting the surface at that point. So this is common with the polar areas or polar region, where the sun usually hits the surface of the earth at nearly 23.5 degrees. So at that inclination, there is less heat. There'll be less heat at that point, less heat, together with light, less light. But here there is more heat, more light. So this is common at the polar region of the earth. So these regions are the one that usually experiences being the pole the pole of the Earth will experience 3 types of or 4 types of seasons as we know them. They might be summer, we have the autumn, we have winter, and then comes in spring. So just because the sun rays are hitting the surface at an angle, at a low angle, this is at a greater angle, perpendicular, at a low angle, it results to summer, the autumn, winter, and spring. During this weather condition or during these seasons, it leads to different rate of growth of plants. So for instance, during spring, it is when we have the fastest growth. We shall have the fastest growth during spring. Why? Fastest growth of population, both plants and animals. Why? Because that is the right conditions. The temperatures are slightly increasing, and plants and animals, they want to make most of the best conditions that are available during summer, so, during spring, that is. So you realize at this point, there's a lot of activities happening. If it is for the plants, as we have already said, there'll be a lot of flowering happening. Flowering, not even just flowering, we can begin with germination or sprouting, germination happening, sprouting of plants, coming in with flowering, seeding, and fruiting. So if this is happening to plants, we expect the same with animals. Animals become, they increase birth rates at that point, will increase, because at that point, the young ones can easily survive. So the birth rates are increasing, and the reason why birth rates are increasing is because there's now more food that is being available that can be used to take care of the young ones that are coming from the birth. So during spring, we shall have the fastest growth in population size. And then during summer and autumn, there'll be slightly fast growth, but winter, now because it's very cold, there'll be a lot of animals hibernating, slower physiological rates. Sometimes even plants, they go into a stage of dormance. So because of that, there is a slow growth at that point. So this is how the seasons are affecting population size, especially the polar regions of the Earth. The tropics, that point where there is, just at the equator, close to the equator, where there is more heat, there is more light, it happens that we only have 2 seasons. We are going to have wet season, and then we have dry season. Now, because it's like heat and light is a constant factor, there is no much fluctuation. What happens because of this, you realize that the population does not fluctuate so much. There is less fluctuation in population. We shall have less fluctuation in population. Why? Because the weather here is slightly constant, although we only have 2 wet and dry seasons. So because of that, we are going to have less fluctuation in the population sizes, because the sun is hitting the Earth at slightly at a perpendicular angle, at perpendicular angle. Perpendicular. So because of that, we are going to have slightly constant heat, constant light, leading to less fluctuation in population sizes. Although we must also note that during wet season, there will be more plants and more animals, because there is enough condition, or there is good condition for growth of both plants and animals. And slightly during dry season, some plants are able to die, especially the ones that are annual plants, the ones that do not last for more than 1 year. They are going to die. When they die, it also reduces amount of food available to animals. When this happens, then also the population of animals is going to go down. So there is less fluctuation in population size. Population size. So we are saying population size can be affected by two factors. One of them we have said season, which is very important, and other causes, we call them extrinsic factors, especially caused by human beings. But under natural, as we have said, season we have said is caused by amount of heat and light that is reaching the earth. That's not the only reason or the only cause of season. Seasons are also caused by revolution of the earth. Revolution of the earth around the sun. So you realize that such areas where we have no sun heating the surface of the earth, there will be a different kind of season or weather conditions. So because of that, it's going to affect amount of heat and amount of light reaching the surface. So on season alone, we can look at some few questions to assist us understand this better. Questions. Question 1. What causes seasons? What causes seasons? Now, we have been able to identify two causes. One of them, we have said, is inclination of the earth. Inclination of the earth. Inclination of the earth. For instance, relative. Let us add this. Relative to the sun. Relative to the sun. We have said that the earth sometimes is inclined, if it is inclined at 23.5 degrees, 23.5 degrees relative to the sun, there will be a difference in the amount of heat and light at that point. Remember, we just drew a globe and we said at that point it is almost 23.5 degrees. So there is less heat and less light at that point, but more heat and more light where the sun or the sun rays strikes the earth at 90 degrees Celsius. So that is one reason, inclination of the earth relative to the sun. And then we have also said another reason is revolution. Revolution of the earth. Of the earth around. Revolution of the earth around the sun. Around the sun. So this one will cause seasons, as we have been able to find out. So because of revolution and inclination of the earth, it causes differences. It causes differences in the intensity of light and amount of light, amount of heat, and amount of heat reaching the surface. Reaching the surface. Then question number 2. List abiotic features that changes with season. List abiotic features that change with seasons. That change with seasons. So we have been able to find out some of the factors that will be affected by seasons. As we have been able to mention prominently, we have found out that light intensity will change with seasons, such that you realize that in some seasons, like during winter, we have a shorter day, e.g. winter. Winter is characterized by short day length. Short day length. So if you are going to have short day length, then the amount of light reaching the surface will be less. So because of that, less and less light. If it is in Australia, we know that this happens during the month of June. During the month of June is when we have the shortest day length. So because of that, there is less light reaching the surface of the earth. And during summer, the opposite is true. You're going to have a longer day length. So during summer, there is a longer day length. And because of that, we are going to have more light. And remember, more light comes with more heat. Less light comes with less light. So light intensity is being affected by seasons. So another factor is temperature. Temperature will also be affected by the seasons. So we have others that if we are going to have light and temperature, as we have already said, that temperature during winter, there will be less heat, and during summer, especially in December, when there is peak of that, is when we have the longest day length in December. We shall realize that also temperature will be highest in December, temperature will be lowest in June, because it is in June when we have winter, it is in December when we have summer. So these two factors, especially temperature, will also have another influence on other factors, like amount of rainfall that reaches the surface. So we are going to have rainfall reaching the surface, or precipitation will be affected by temperature. Now, this one again comes with other factor like humidity, because we know that humidity is amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. that maybe is arising from evaporation from the surface of the earth, from plants, but that one happens after when we have either more rainfall or less rainfall. So humidity could be high, humidity could be lower, and within these two seasons, we can choose which one will have the highest humidity, or when we have wet and dry. Suppose we are considering the tropics. The wet, during wet season, we expect high humidity. There'll be high humidity. And then vice versa is true, or the contrary is true. When it is dry season, we expect low humidity. So we have already found out that how the abiotic factors can affect distribution of living organisms and also the population size. So others also include solar radiations. Solar radiations. Solar radiations. So sometime when the sky is very clear, there will be more radiations reaching the earth, because there is no obstacle. There is no obstacle to the radiation from the sun. But now the opposite also becomes true when there is more cloud, or when it's cloudy, when there is less cloud, that is, more radiations, the less radiations will be reaching the earth. Other factors that are affected by this include day length. Day length, we have found out that in polar region of the earth, we expect that during winter we shall have the shortest day length, and during summer we expect the longest day length. Then the other is speed of wind speed. Wind speed can also be affected by seasons, because seasons comes with changes in pressure, in the atmospheric pressure. So you realize that during winter it is almost cool. The wind speed is low speed during winter. And summer there is slightly high speed. So it should be noted that seasons are varying with how the sun rays are striking the surface of the earth. In polar region, there is striking of the surface at a lower angle, but in the tropics, the striking of the surface at a perpendicular angle to the surface of the earth. So because of that, in the tropics, there is less seasonal variation, lower seasonal variation. But in the polar region, there is high seasonal variation. Then question 3, outline how the seasons affect plants. Outline how seasons affects plants. How seasons affect plants. It's going to affect plants if some seasons are providing a conducive environment for growth. Now just let us just look at the seasons in Australia, especially the southern part of Australia. So we have realized that we have seasons, four kind of seasons. If it is not, if we can consider this is region A, we are going to have summer, then followed by the autumn, then we have winter, then we have spring. So we have said already that during spring, winter is coldest, but now from winter to spring, temperatures begin to increase. When temperatures begin to increase, there's something physiologically that happens in living organisms. There is activation of enzymes. Enzymes become activated. So this comes with activation of enzymes. So with the activation of enzymes, we shall have organisms becoming more active, more activity of organisms, including plants. So as they become more active, it means there'll be more physiological processes being promoted, like as we have mentioned previously, germination. If the seeds were in dormant stage in winter, they now germinate. If we had some plants that are vegetative that were dormant, they start sprouting. So as they pick these activities towards maturity, flowering sets in, and other activities like seeding, and fruiting. So it's like within the spring, because we have conducive environment, activities of organisms are increasing. Organisms will, especially the plants, will become more active. They'll increase their physiology to make use of the spring season. So to make most. So this is just to make most. Of conducive conditions in the spring, most of spring condition. So we expect that plants during spring season will be more. In fact, you'll see a lot of plants growing around, green plants appearing nearly everywhere. But so in essence, there is fastest growth of plants. Now summer is slightly, and autumn comes in with higher temperatures, high speed of wind, which increases evaporation rates from plant surfaces. It will slightly affect the physiology of the plants, and also enzymes. It's like during summer, the temperatures are just approaching optimum or nearly above optimum. So activity of enzymes will come down, activity of organisms goes down, together with evaporation and transpiration from plants. So the growth of plants usually goes down. It is just fast if we compare fast growth. But in winter, now it is very cold. Because it is very cold, enzymes become inactivated. Activity of the physiological activities of the plants also goes down. So in essence, it becomes very slow growth. Question number 4. The question reads, the red-tailed black a cockatoo lives in woodlands. Lives in woodlands. It lives in woodlands across Australia. It lives in woodland across Australia. They eat seeds and are nomadic. They eat seeds and are nomadic. So now the question is, explain the nomadic lifestyle. Explain why the nomadic lifestyle is called a seasonal behavior. It's called a seasonal behavior. Why it is called a seasonal behavior? Now we are saying they eat seeds. They eat seeds and they are nomadic. So the first thing that we must find out, where do they obtain the seeds? They eat seeds mainly from eucalyptus. Eucalyptus, and we have other plants called the she-oaks. The she-oaks. So it's this she-oaks that provides the seeds together with fruits. But the functioning or physiology of the eucalyptus and she-oaks is seasonal, in that during some season in some areas, for example, if it is in southern Australia, because of the 4 seasons, eucalyptus and she-oaks will not produce seeds throughout. So they might produce seeds during springtime. So the black cockatoo will be following the eucalyptus in each of this area, because it is like these 2 plants are also constantly spread or distributed across Australia. But their fruiting and seeding seasons usually vary depending on the season of that particular area. So if it is in the tropics, it's like the eucalyptus and she-oaks will be producing seeds or fruits and seeds when it is during the wet season. But when it comes to southern part of Australia, they produce seeds and fruits during spring. So during springtime, the cockatoo will be in the southern part of Australia. Why? Following the seeds and fruits produced by these 2 plants, the eucalyptus and the she-oaks, to feed on seeds and fruits produced during this time. But when it comes to other wet season in the tropical part of Australia, then it is again the she-oaks and the eucalyptus that are producing the fruits and seeds. So again they migrate to other parts. They are going to migrate to other parts with the wet season, following the same food, seeds and fruits. Question number 5. During spring, There's a moth called Acrotis, the moth. The moth, Acrotis infusa. Acrotis infusa fly from southern Queensland to caves in snow mountains. To caves in snow mountains where they stay inactive throughout summer. Where they stay inactive throughout summer. So the question is, there's another statement there, from April onwards, they return. To north, to mate and lay eggs. So the question is, explain the changes in population size. In population size. Now for us to get the question properly, so let us just, if you can't get the scientific name properly, just understand that it is moth and it is flying from southern to the caves. But there is a condition why during summer. So let us first begin with why they go to the caves during summer. So they are going to the caves during summer. We know the condition in summer. It is hot, it is dry, the wind speed is high. So they are going to the caves in summer just to escape conditions during summer, to escape harsh conditions, to escape harsh conditions that characterizes summer. We already know those conditions where there is a high amount of heat, where there is a lot of evaporation from the surface. That one cannot encourage breeding. Such conditions cannot encourage laying of eggs and then mating and laying of eggs. So that escape, we already were able to come across where organisms become inactive to escape harsh conditions, especially when it is hot. You can remember that term. We said it is called aestivation. So the phenomenal aestivation will be taking effect because they are going to hide, to become inactive when it is very hot. We call that one as aestivation. But in April onwards, they return north. When they return north, it is during summer. So we note that they are going to the north in April because it is springtime. Now we have said springtime conditions are conducive for all the physiological processes. Conditions are conducive for breeding, which encompasses or includes both mating and laying of eggs, which is inclusive of mating and laying of eggs. And laying of the eggs. So that's why this is how we can explain the changes in population in the two parts. Southern part, it is summertime. The conditions are not so good for activities like breeding, which includes mating and laying of eggs. So they'll have to hide for some time. But now they'll flow back. They'll flow back to north during April, which is the springtime, characterized by conditions that are good for breeding activity. So you realize that during this time, there is high population. If you can just explain the changes in population. There is high population in April in the northern parts, and then there is low population during summer. And the last question there, the last question, explain why there is a bust and boom. Explain why there is a bust and boom. Bust and boom, circles or cycles of rodents, rodents population size. Rodents population size in arid environment. In arid environment, while tropical environment has a stable, tropical environment has a stable rodent population. Rodent population size. So here we are looking at same kind of organisms. The question is talking about same kind of species or organisms, but they are in different regions. We have the tropical region, and then in the semi-arid environment, tropical environment and semi-arid environment. Now let us examine what are the conditions in tropical environment. Tropical environment is characterized by less variation in seasons. So because of less variation in season, we can say it is slightly constant. The conditions in tropical environment are slightly constant. Remember, we just identified that we have two types of conditions, wet and dry seasons. But during the dry season, again, we have what you call short rains. So because of that, the conditions being normal or conditions being constant, there is no need of a high and low, rise and fall in the population of rodents. So it also means that the population size of the rodents is going to be slightly constant because of constant environment. So we have constant environmental conditions, So because of that, there is constant supply. There is a stable supply. Slightly stable, not constantly stable, stable supply of food. Supply of food. Now, because it is food that is the major driver of population size, then it follows that the population size of the rodents will be slightly constant. So note that we are using the word slightly. It can't be constant, a straight line. Remember, we have talked of that point where there is fall and rise. So it can't just be a straight line. It is going to be slightly constant. So this is the tropical environment, having less variation, having slightly constant conditions. There is stable supply of food. And food being a major factor that controls population size, therefore, again, the size of rodents is going to be constant. But if we look at another case, the arid environment, arid conditions. Now, for arid environment, now, let us also consider some conditions in arid environment. Arid environment, most of the time, it has short rains, short, scarce rains that are within a very short period, short rains, but that are scarce. Sometimes a year can go without rains, but where conditions are stable, or environmental conditions are not changing so much, we shall have 1 month or a few months of short but very little amount of rainfall. So during this condition, when we have some few rains, plants make most of these short rains. They'll make most of these short rains. So because plants, we have already identified plants as the major producer in an ecosystem, it means as they make most, they'll be producing more food during that short rain, during that short season. We'll be able to support the rodent population. Rodent population. So during this period, because rodent population is being supported, there'll be a boom. Hence, increase in population of rodents. But this one does not last for a long time. So there is a boom. Very rapid increase. This is not going to last for, remember, it's short rains. It does not last for a long time. Now, when short rains goes and then we have completely dry season, it will start with plants. Plants will die or they'll undergo dormance. And because when plants die, there'll be less food. Hence, it follows that the rodent population also drops. So when short rain ceases or stops, when short rains stops, plant population drops. So when plant population drops, it follows that rodent population also goes down. Hence, rodent population also drops. So this is a drop, a burst. So at the end of it, that's why we have a burst and boom. So burst and boom. In fact, during these short rains, we shall have so many rodents in the arid environment as compared to the tropical environment. Because in the tropics, it's like the rodents are assured that there is enough supply of food, so there is no need in hurrying to produce more of the rodents because conditions are always available for breeding and also producing, or that leads to increase in population of the rodents. But here they must make most of the short rains. That's the only time when conditions are conducive for breeding, hence increase in population. So let us look at another topic, destruction of habitat. Destruction of habitat. So let us introduce just this. We shall build more on it during our next lesson. But let us start with the word or the term habitat. Habitat. Now, previously when we were introducing the topic or chapter, communities and environment, we came across this. So it's just a reminder that a habitat is a home or a place where an organism lives. A place where an organism lives. Now, for it to live there, it means that place has a set of conditions that will support the organism. Because it has a set of conditions that supports the organism. So the question is, what are these conditions that must be available in a habitat to enable the organism live? Conditions. Now, conditions are those factors that will facilitate the organism to be able to carry all its physiological functions like reproduction, excretion, respiration, and the rest. So we expect that in this habitat there is enough supply of oxygen. Oxygen for respiratory purposes. If there are plants, again, we must have a balance between carbon dioxide and oxygen gas. Because the two, this will support the plants and plants will produce oxygen. And then other conditions include free of predation or less of predation. We have few enemies to the organism, less of predation, and several others like breeding sites. There must be breeding site. If it is terrestrial environment, there must be spawning site. If it is aquatic environment, and if it is an arboreal environment, then there must be also nesting sites. And of course, breeding comes with appropriate mates, where we have mates to the organism. So there are several conditions, but this could be the major conditions that the organism needs. So if we look at a condition like less predation, where there's less predation, sometimes you can have predators, but they are not able to prey on the organism in that habitat. Maybe because the organism is producing some very important features like camouflage, ability to camouflage. If the organism is able to camouflage in that habitat, then there'll be less predation on the organism. Remember camouflage, where the body covering resembles that one of the environment. If, for instance, we have the antelopes. Antelopes most of the time will be grazing in a field, an open field, but if it is savanna grassland and the grass are drying, then that one camouflages the antelopes against predators like the lions. So for predation or less predation to happen, the organism must be able to produce some adaptive features for that purpose. So we just want to look at this, and then in our next lesson we shall be looking at the habitat in details, finding out, do we have habitats change, and what are some of the factors that causes habitat change. And then in the end we shall also find out, is there an effect on the ecosystem if the habitat is going to change? What kind of effects will it have on biodiversity, for instance, or on the organisms that are living in that given habitat? So thank you.